This is Decoding Superhuman with your host, Boomer Anderson.
All right, Superhumans, it's Boomer Anderson, and I'm back with another episode of the Decoding Superhuman podcast. So this is the second of our episodes with executives, entrepreneurs, and CEOs covering how they use different domains of what we call the systems approach to performance to help them really improve their performance. And so similar to a former podcast guest, Marco, we're going to talk a little bit about mindfulness today and how this one CEO and entrepreneur uses it in his company and companies, I should say, to really help enjoy or improve the human experience. And I have to give a shout out to Katie Ward for this one because she provided the connection. But our guest today is Arye Shabtai. And Arye is on a mission to transform global business culture in order to improve society and the environment. He is the founder and CEO of Serenity Ventures, a global mastermind network for impact entrepreneurs. Having co-founded two businesses in the wellness space prior to Serenity Ventures, Arye now supports entrepreneurs to build more profitable, impactful, and sustainable businesses while having fun in the process. So what did we get into in this episode? We talked a little bit about Arye's really journey with Crohn's disease and how he unpacked that. And I think that roadmap actually provides a little bit of an interesting insight as to how to deal with a lot of problems. We got into his health journey, of course. We talked about how Arye used principles from Vipassana, mindfulness, and other aspects like yoga in his own companies. And of course, we did touch a little bit on ayahuasca. The show notes for this one are at decodingsuperhuman.com/Arye. That's ARYE. Enjoy my episode with Arye Shabtai. Arye, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Boomer. Thanks for having me.
So I want to start off a little bit by painting a little bit about your background, because when I got to talking to you, you told me a little bit about your previous history with some companies and how things may have, you wish they could have gone differently, said it another way. Do you mind just giving us a little bit of your journey here to mindfulness?
I would actually make a slight adjustment to that, is that not that I wish it could have gone differently, is that it taught me how to do business differently.
There you go. Great language, by the way.
Yeah, appreciate that. Because definitely all these, mistakes that I made early on in building businesses, long story short, I was working in the, my own wellness tech businesses and, let myself get burnt out, and kind of walking through the backstory that got me here. That really taught me, how and why to do business differently, and just to set some context, I was reflecting the other day that 2 out of 3 out of the businesses that I've started came from me learning to reverse my own health issues, and seeing how I could use that process to help other people. So I'll rewind. It was, I was a junior in college at the University of Maryland. I just
College Park.
College Park.
Yeah. I grew up in Philadelphia, so it's not too far, and I had a few good friends go there too. Yeah,
definitely. And there's, at the time, a really kind of thriving entrepreneurial scene that was really growing. There were student-run, co-working spaces and incubators popping up. So, I kind of knew that I was going to go to college and start a business. And over it's probably about the previous 3 years at that point, I had gone through my own healing journey of learning to reverse Crohn's disease. Getting to the root cause of the disease, incorporating just yoga and meditation and acupuncture, and really, really taking a holistic approach.
Do you mind just laying out for people who may not be familiar with Crohn's? What were some of the things you're going through? Because I've heard it can be pretty brutal.
Yeah. For me, it was like having a chronic stomach virus, like a stomach virus for 2 years straight. I was never overweight, but I became underweight, and there were kind of two connected issues. One was that I kind of lost my appetite, and two is that I had inflammation in a certain part of my intestine. That's kind of the case. The textbook definition of Crohn's disease is inflammation in the ileum. It's a part of the intestine. And so that also triggers poor nutrient absorption. So I lost my appetite. I'm not absorbing nutrients. So I'm dealing with a whole host of symptoms from, lack of energy, brain fog, pain, all the symptoms you would experience from a stomach virus, sometimes throwing up, sometimes diarrhea, sometimes constipation, just all the time. There's some gut dysbiosis symptom going on. And, going down the conventional route, I saw it was a dead end for me. The doctor said, "Oh, you've got this chronic disease. There's, when it flares up, we'll write a prescription, and then, we'll just have you on pharmaceuticals for the rest of your life." And it got to a point where actually the side effects of all these medications were worse than the disease itself. Which says a lot because I just described a pretty painful situation.
Yeah.
And that just inspired me to start doing my own self-study, my own research about nutrition and lifestyle design, and really taking responsibility for my own health and well-being. And that's what led me to start my first company when I was in college. It's a social network for wellness. So now it's the world's largest social network for wellness. It's called Daocloud.com, Daocloud.com. And it's like a network marketplace where you can find information and community of other wellness professionals and people, like-minded people that are interested in living in optimal health. And, that was a 5-year journey before, a year and a half ago, I resigned from that company. In that company, that was also when I started experimenting with these ideas of intentionally building a culture, building a resilient culture, building a culture that practiced mindfulness. So for example, I incorporated a daily meditation into the team. We had a virtual team, members around the world. But every day at a certain time, they can come on if they want, hop on Skype or Zoom, whatever we were using at the time. And I would lead a meditation for the team or give other people in the team an opportunity if they wanted to lead meditations. So that was kind of one of the experiments that I led in incorporating mindfulness into the culture, giving people unique opportunities to step up into leadership roles, leading a 10-minute meditation for the group. So what was interesting about that experience is that, being a young founder who just really wanted to get certain results, and I wasn't really satisfied with the results that I was getting. So I was being really hard on myself and took 5 years, didn't take a vacation. And there's always that next thing to do. It's like, all right, we got to raise some funds, and then we got to get the next product out the door. And then, there's that marketing campaign. It's like, there's always something more to do. And I wasn't really giving myself permission to take time and rest and recover. It's like always doing for 5 years straight. To the point where the last year, I started just, it felt like I was in a chronic state of anxiety, and having some relationship issues with my business partner, and just, feeling like I was not serving myself to keep going down that path. And so I decided 5 years in that the company felt like it was ready to grow without me. And I decided to resign and, in a way, redesign my life. And so I think that was also just an opportunity for me to reflect on, okay, I really want to be building businesses that have an impact to improve society and the environment. but I also want to live a great quality of life, right? So I want to have that balance. And so, yeah, it took 6 months to study, to travel and study yoga and meditation in different contexts. Went to 10 different countries last year. And then that's what gave me the insight that there is a new way of doing business. Because 6 months after taking a sabbatical, then I started incorporating a new business into the mix, because I had built a community of other entrepreneurs around the world, and I saw that what I was experiencing was more than common. Really, it was the norm for entrepreneurs to kind of sacrifice. And so I started doing some holistic executive coaching and workshops, and helping to change the conversation and change the mindset that entrepreneurs are working with, so that we can be more mindful about getting the results that really matter in building highly profitable, impactful, sustainable business, but also having fun with the process.
Yeah, having fun with that process is absolutely crucial. And it's something that I didn't appreciate for a very long time. I've shared with you my story. It kind of took and hit me head first, or heart first, quite literally.
Yeah.
But
right.
Let's talk, because one of the things that we love to talk about at Decoding Superhuman is this concept of empowered responsibility. And one of your example that you gave of your Crohn's disease is so powerful for me, because you saw that what people were telling you to do wasn't necessarily working, and you kind of took the bull by the horns and really sought to fix it yourself. Do you mind just talking through how you went about just researching it? Because I think people having an example of how to go about researching some of these areas themselves is very useful.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'll say is that it wasn't easy.
Exactly.
And that was actually what led me to start the business, because just going on Google and saying, all right, I've got Crohn's disease, what do I do? I mean, it took me 2 years before I really felt like I had an understanding of what needed to be done. So, lots of experimentation with myself, with different diet protocols, working with different holistic practitioners, eventually finding my way to functional medicine. That really accelerated the learning curve of, having a professional that wasn't there to necessarily diagnose and prescribe, to cover up the symptoms, but really to work and guide me to understand myself at a deeper level, right? To guide and suggest, okay, eliminate all the foods that might be, causing inflammation, that might be agitating and irritating the digestive tract for 30 days, and then introduce foods one by one, right? So self-experimentation was kind of key for me. When I look at science, right, there's the, Western data-driven empirical science, which has its role of looking at these studies, seeing what's worked for other people, finding the trends and patterns. I believe that that's very important. And also I believe that everyone needs to understand themselves, right? That everyone can heal not by just reading the research, but by listening to the body and by studying ourself. So really being committed to that continuous process of self-study, which takes time. It takes patience. It takes dedication. It's not like a quick, all right, I'm going to drink a glass of water with this pill and, hope that my disease is fixed.
Everybody wants that though, right?
I don't want that, I've learned that I don't want the quick fix.
Enjoy the journey.
Enjoy the journey, appreciate the pain because there's a lesson there, not to, cause pain for myself, but, one of the tools that I've used, especially when it comes to self-study is meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And, I did a Vipassana retreat last year, and one of the kind of philosophies that's, Vipassana will teach is this idea of like equanimity, rather than avoiding pain and seeking pleasure, which in the long run is actually like a cycle for misery. Mm-hmm. Because as humans, we're going to experience pain, we're going to experience pleasure, and they're both temporary sensations, mm-hmm. right? And so rather than wanting the quick fix of, okay, I want pleasure now and I want to avoid pain now, of just be able to feel and like appreciate whatever is coming up as a gift. So if I feel pain, if I feel stress or anxiety, rather than trying to get rid of it, I feel into and listen into like, what is that trying to teach me? What is the lesson here, right? If I want to feel more light emotions, because anxiety is a kind of dark and heavy emotion. So if I do value lighter emotions, I want to feel more joy and peace of mind, then I can listen to that anxiety and listen to the gift. Okay, what are the habits? What are the routines that I need to change so that I can work my way into a higher baseline? Mm-hmm. That's the way that I approach in a more scientific and mindful way, my own healing and, energetic mastery process. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Can we talk, and I'm going to come back to the meditation in a little bit, because I know you're doing that a lot now with your companies in particular. But in terms of when you're traveling the world, first off, I would love to hear what countries you're traveling to, but you built your second business around sort of executive coaching and changing the conversation. I want to go a little bit more into that changing of the conversation, because when it comes to standard thinking, particularly in the US, but also some other places, there's this standard way of thought that we graduate from university, if we graduated from university at all. We go to work 9 to 5, if we're lucky, only 9 to 5. And then you come home and you kind of have spaghetti night, etc. And there's that sort of standard way of thinking. Do you mind going into a little bit on how you change the conversation and what that kind of entails?
Yeah. So I'll start with what you had brought up in the earlier part of the question about my travels and kind of seeing trends around the world. So I was actually living in San Francisco with my last company, and I decided, more than decided, it feels like a magnet kind of pulled me out. I moved to Tel Aviv, Israel, and kind of saw that as a great opportunity to set up a new home base that was geographically more central between East and West. That's kind of the way that my mindset works. I like to balance the Eastern and Western mindsets. Mm-hmm. So geographically, I want to be in between the two axes, so to speak.
It's a great tech hub too.
It's a great tech hub. There are a lot of very important problems to solve here. There are important problems to solve everywhere, but I feel particularly drawn to being a part of the peace process here in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. I went to India for a month. I did yoga teacher training there. Came back to Israel for a month. Then I went on another 2-month journey. I went to Denmark, Portugal, Spain. Did another yoga teacher training there. Came back to Israel for maybe 2 months. Went to Greece. I had a retreat with the team that helped to get Serenity Ventures going. This is the new venture that I've started. Went to Bali. I was at a Mind Valley event. So they have Mind Valley is a really amazing company as well. It's also shifting the conversation and educating and empowering people around lifestyle design and Yeah, just helping people to see there's a different way of thinking than the conventional 9 to 5. I'm going to retire when I'm 60, way of living.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was doing all this, I was, really keen to study both the healing and the business communities around the world. And what I see happening is, there's this emergence of young entrepreneurs that want to have a business that improves either society or the environment, that they feel like the business is actually making an impact, that it is making them money, but it is also leading them to feel fulfilled, which the previous generation did seem to value and account for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it wasn't as much in the story of, okay, go graduate, get a job, get a good paycheck, get a house so that you can retire when you're 60. Like that was kind of the narrative, but it wasn't like, and also make sure that you feel fulfilled. Mm-hmm. That was more like an afterthought, like if you can do that, you're super lucky, but everyone can do that. So maybe everyone is lucky. But really the shift in conversation that I think needs to happen is around the use of business as a tool that influences society and the environment, right? Mm-hmm. So we can either use business as like a hammer, and we could take the house and we could break it up, right? So imagine that business is a tool, and we take the hammer and we're, hammering holes in the walls so that we can go and, hire someone to go fix it, because that's good for the economy if we break holes in the wall and then we go hire someone to fix it, right? That's like the old way of doing business. Like, let's create holes in the wall so we can go and hire someone to fix it. Mm-hmm. Versus now it's like, well, like we have the same hammer and we can actually use it to improve the house. Mm-hmm. Because we've done so much damage to the house that if we don't, we won't have somewhere to live. Like the statistics on the loss of biodiversity, for example, every day, the amount of species that are going extinct, it's alarming because I value, living in a resilient and, sustainable culture. Mm-hmm. And so there are needs, that humanity needs to focus our attention on improving both our values in society, the way that we communicate and relate with each other, and also the way that we communicate and relate with our environment. So that's kind of the shift that I see happening in the business world, is that we have these problems with society and the environment. Sure, you can start a nonprofit and ask for donations, but I think that there are people that are kind of waking up and saying, well, I can use the same profit mechanism, right, to improve society and environment. Mm-hmm. So that I can actually have a profit engine that makes a sustainable business that is aligned with an incentive, beyond just money. It's like a deeper, or I should say a more complex incentive system. It's like, yes, one is profit, and two is, well, what am I doing to improve society, the environment? So that's the kind of shift in conversation that I am wanting to continue to encourage and support. And that's what I think needs to happen. Like if we're planning to have, offspring that will actually have a planet to live on.
All right. So what were some of the reactions as you're spreading this word, right? Because it's let's say if we have a bell curve, 67% of the norm, or 67% is normal, right? And if you have a bell curve and you say the normal isn't familiar with these concepts, and you're out there talking about these concepts with people as you're traveling in these 10 different countries, what's kind of the feedback that you're getting?
Well, I guess I was immersed in in unique communities where this was.
That's probably the norm.
Yeah, like that was like, oh yeah, it was really refreshing because we were like outliers,
Hmm.
and then we went and we found these kind of micro communities um, where, for example, in Mind Valley,
Hmm.
there's a high, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are mindful of designing a lifestyle that leads to that fulfillment, that leads to, uh, living in optimal health.
Hmm.
So that's kind of the norm. So I guess I've sought out communities where people are already involved in this conversation.
Hmm.
Um, and it brings up a question of how do we make this a part of the mainstream conversation? Because you turn on the news and, you know, uh, it's a whole different story.
Yeah, if you go, and so I try to avoid turning on the news, so to speak, because
Yeah.
it's a little bit, I mean, it doesn't always paint the complete picture, right? But if you look at kind of Mind Valley and where I guess you and I are in
Yeah.
terms of the crossing the chasm reference, right? Like we're still in that early adopter stage and sort of how do you jump over the chasm? Anyways, that's probably another show topic for another time. Let's
Hmm.
talk about your businesses now and how you've brought these concepts into the business. Let's start by talking about what you've taken away from your experience with yoga.
Hmm. Yeah. So, well, first, when I was first introduced to yoga, I saw that it was like a way of movement. You go to these yoga classes, you get your stretch on, maybe you'll sweat, you'll feel relaxed. But the more that I've really studied yoga, the more I've realized that it is a science of self-realization. Like we use the postures, we use the movements, really to connect the mind and the body, but more even on a more deep level than that, it's to see the light of the soul. As Iyengar would say.
Mm-hmm.
Iyengar was one of the first yoga teachers to bring asana to the West. And even if someone doesn't quote unquote believe in the soul, right? It's to really understand ourself, and we can use it purely, to understand what actually can we do to live with these lighter emotions. So that's what yoga has taught me is like a tool to align with a steady progression of like moving up a ladder of lighter and lighter emotions,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's kind of one way that I see uh, the yoga alignment helping me and especially the clients that I work with, because what I found is that when we are able to work on moving up the emotional ladder, like if we were to see that there's a spectrum of emotions that are some are darker and heavier and some are lighter.
Oh, this is
we're
fascinating. I love this. Let's continue.
Yeah, right. And so we might have like a certain baseline.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so our baseline could either be we are living in a baseline of anger, like that is a very dark and dense emotion. Think about it. When you're angry, like, are you likely to be creative? Are you likely to like build meaningful relationships?
Never.
Are you likely to be able to attract, a team around you? You'll attract other angry people, sure, but are they going to be creative? Like, I don't believe so. But then on the other side, if your baseline is like joy, right? If
Mm-hmm.
that is your baseline, then you'll have more energy for creativity. You'll attract more of a creative team. Um, and so that's like the light and dark. If we were to look at what we want is, what I want is this baseline of joy and light emotions. And so I study myself and I see what actually leads, to a progression up that ladder. And one of the components of yoga is self-study, right? So we do the postures, we do the asana as a way of practicing self-study. So I feel like I might have kind of strayed from your question. So I want to get some feedback and perspective.
No. Let's go into first off, because my question was originally, I think you answered my original question, but I'm going to go into another one in a second. What kind of yoga do you practice today?
So the way that I see it is that it's all yoga. Like yoga is the science of self-realization. So if how can I simplify this? Yoga means union. The word yoga means union, right? It's a way of creating union in all the parts of our life. Union between mind, body, and spirit. Union between self and other. That's why I see yoga as much more than just asana, right? So there's certain styles of asana that I'm more attracted to now because of what my physical and mental body need. But the way that we can incorporate yoga into everything that we do, right? Because one of the ways that I understand what is yoga is, the science of self-realization and the process of stilling the fluctuations of the mind is one other definition of yoga that comes from the Yoga Sutras. And we can incorporate that into everything that we do. We can incorporate that into our business, using our business to serve the collective good. I would say that is even practicing a form of yoga. So now that I've answered a more esoteric part of your question, on a physical level, I've been recently really attracted to Iyengar method of yoga because I'm recovering from an injury from a bike accident. And I found an amazing studio nearby that has a medical yoga class. And it's an Iyengar studio. Iyengar has a reputation for being very disciplined about alignment. By the way, can you hear the call to prayer in the background?
I can, but it's for everybody listening. This is the call to prayer in Tel Aviv.
This is the call to prayer. I live in a neighborhood. It's part of Tel Aviv, but it's called Yafo.
Okay.
It's an ancient Arab neighborhood in Tel Aviv. So 5 times a day, there's a
good call. So you get the nice. Is it 4 a.m. is the first one? No.
Around then, I think it's like 4:30.
Yeah, I used to spend a lot of time in Jakarta, and the hotel I would stay in was right behind a mosque, and so it was a nice way to just not have an alarm clock. All right, so you guys are probably wondering, what are the brands of blue light blockers that I recommend? Well, one of them is the sponsor for today's podcast, and they are Blue Blocks. I've had the CEO, Andy Mant, on the show before where we got into a really deep dive on blue light. And you know that if you get any amount of blue light in your glasses, no matter if it's 3%, 10%, whatever, it does disrupt melatonin production. And so Andy has created blue light blockers that hold up to the highest standards. And in fact, and I'll link to it in the show notes, you can see when he's tested it versus other brands that they always come out on top. And so quality is a thing I appreciate and is what exactly I recommend for all of our clients. But if you head over to blueblocks.com, that's BLUBLOX.com, and plug in the code DS15, you're going to get 15% off. And now, on with the show. So we were just talking about Iyengar yoga and how it's really helped you recover from injury.
Yes.
Say a little bit more about that, and then I want to transition more into your business.
Sure. Yeah. So with Iyengar yoga, so there's a deep set of layers to the philosophy. But one is really on like self-awareness of really being able to feel all the parts of the body, So like, for example, I can spread all the tips of my fingers and I can give all of the attention to the feeling of my fingers being spread. So there's a certain level of intelligence that's going into my hand right now. But what if I'm able to do that while still feeling all the other parts of my body? And if I'm, let's say I'm standing upright at the moment. Right now I'm sitting, but if I were standing upright with my feet rooted on the floor and just standing, it's called Tadasana, it's mountain pose, right? And so with an Iyengar style of yoga, we would activate all the muscles and basically connect muscle and bone, okay? And so we intentionally create that tension in the body as a way of sending intelligence through the body. So for example, if in my knee, because it was a ligament and cartilage injury, if I were to not pay attention, if I were to not send intelligence, then I might lose certain feelings. I might lose certain range of motion in my knee, or I might put myself at risk down the road for having other injuries. But because every day I'm intentionally sending intelligence into my knee and engaging muscle to bone, I am building a more resilient knee through that process. And I'm doing that in a way where there's alignment in the body. So that's one of the layers of Iyengar. But the other is that every cell of our body, like we can see the light of the soul, that like for whatever you understand about the nature of spirit, that there is some source for all the energy in the body, right? And so we can see that there is this light that is giving all the cells of our body energy, right? And so one of the aims within that Iyengar talks about is that yoga is a way of seeing and merging with the light of the soul. So we can either be unconscious and live in this state of illusion and see the separation between self and other.
So that we can Cartesian duality, right? So
yeah,
okay.
Or we can see that everything is deeply connected. All the cells in my body, while they materially might be separate, they're all reflections of the light of the soul, that the energy from the soul, the light from the soul is giving all the cells in my body, all the thoughts in my mind, energy to work with. Excellent. And that we have different soul parts, but there is one super soul, right? So, and this is actually one idea that is deeply inspiring for me, is that, I used to think that I have ideas. I have, I'm very creative. I have these ideas, but what I've learned is that I have a way of accessing the collective consciousness and downloading ideas, right? So if we both tap into that collective consciousness, we can both download either the same idea or different ideas. But I think that's also one of the benefits that I found from integrating yoga into a business perspective, is that we can tap into the collective consciousness, see what needs to be done to serve the collective good, and take action on that idea, And I can imagine for someone who doesn't understand the nature of spirit and might say, I don't believe in that there is a soul.
I think I have a question here on this concept of collective consciousness, because again, going back to our bell curve here, if we're talking to the mean and sort of, the mean, or I guess let's go with the average listener, executive, who is, in certain industries, that concept of consciousness is sort of one that has been shrouded in woo, right? How have you come to understand consciousness yourself? Like what other than, it seems like yoga's played a big role in that, but what other, either books, tools, things that you've come across on your way have helped you understand this consciousness?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one tool that I found to be very helpful was Vipassana. Vipassana is a 10-day silent meditation retreat, non-dogmatic, non-religious. But what happens when we are able to eliminate all the sensory input from other people, from the internet, but really just connect and listen to the breath, and sends the intelligence of the mind through different parts of our body, and to really just sit with that. At least what I've experienced is that it's like this place where you realize that, well, maybe this sounds obvious, but you've never had a time when you weren't conscious. Like there's, even when you're in what we call the unconscious mind is a state of consciousness, right? So we're like always in a state of now, always in a state of consciousness. So yes, Vipassana was a really powerful tool for me. It helped me to simplify a lot of the questions that I had, that there were, questions on top of questions, but getting to like the root question and being able to understand what I'm really working towards, to really simplify that for myself. So I found that to be effective as a productivity tool,
For sure.
but also as a way of understanding myself on a deeper level. The other is working with plant medicine. So I went to my first ayahuasca retreat at the end of last year, and I've been working more and more with plant medicine. One of the tools that I can use to directly connect to the collective consciousness.
This is beautiful. So let's take this, because these are really good tools for people to potentially explore. How do you apply this in your business now? Because I've seen the concept of mindfulness being introduced into business in very wrong ways. You think of the meditation class that's offered at lunch for employees of a bank, but if you actually go and neglect your job, your employer may not view that so properly. How do you introduce it, and what are some of the results you've seen from it?
Yeah, I think it's very individualized, right? Whereas some people might want to, have that meditation in the middle of the day. Other people want to be able to get out and go surf, right? Like everyone might have different wants and ways of practicing mindfulness, which that word in and of itself has been diluted. I'm wanting to be able to communicate more clearly what it is. I think another synonym for it is lifestyle design, is active habits that align with our end goals. These are maybe more tangible ideas of, what mindfulness is in practice, right? It's more self-awareness around our habits or routines or beliefs and how they align with our end goals. So that's one of the ways that I work with entrepreneurs is help to be a mirror to reflect, are your habits, beliefs, and routines aligned with your end goals, right? And so we can use this idea of mindfulness to analyze, to study, to feel into, and to evolve our habits, beliefs, and routines to align with our end goals, right? So like one habit, someone might want, to go and, practice yoga in a class, 5 times a week. And like that habit gives them the movement, it gives them the connection with their breath, that they're able to, clear their mind and enhance their creativity. Mm-hmm. And for that, they value creativity. And so, one example is just working with people on an individual level to understand, what are the habits, beliefs, and routines that you need to evolve to better align with your end goals? And then what action do you want to take to do that? Do you want to go and, register with the yoga studio? And, how can we gamify that? Mm-hmm. So that if you want to commit to going 5 times a week, but you're in this habit of self-sacrificing, like how can we assign a cost to not taking the action that serves your best interest in the long run? Mm-hmm. Or if it's like a daily meditation practice. Here's a good example. I was working with a new client who told me, I've wanted to explore meditation. I'm not good at it. This is kind of a common story of like, I'm really curious about meditation. I see it works for other people, but like, I'm just not good at it. That's a very common story that I hear. It's like, okay, cool. So you told me that you want to explore meditation. Seems like you're clear on why you want to do that. So like, what do you want to do? How often do you want to meditate? Okay, I want to meditate every day for 10 minutes. Cool. All right. So rather than feeling bad about yourself if you miss a day, why don't we gamify it? Why don't we add a consequence? For every day that you miss, why don't you make a commitment? One that I like is put some money on the line, mm-hmm. right? Like there's a behavioral economic study where people would rather not lose money than gain money. Mm-hmm. Okay. So put some money on the line where for the next 2 weeks, if you want to meditate 10 minutes a day and you miss a day, what is the cost? Do you want to either meditate or invest $100 in planting trees? Like that's my go-to consequence for myself is like, if I make a commitment that I want to gamify, mm-hmm. I want, especially when it comes to like changing habits, I kind of use this game with myself. Like either I will do X or I will own a consequence and invest $1,000 in planting trees. Mm-hmm. Like something that's still like, it's going to be painful. Like I'm not going to be out on the streets, because I don't have that money, but like, something significant
and meaningful, right?
And it's like, at least there's some benefit. Like mm-hmm. either I have this habit that I want, or like there are trees that are being planted. Mm-hmm. And the consequence is that I have less money in my bank account. So I'm able to feel that pain and get that reinforcement, and I don't feel bad about myself. I just own the consequence.
That's great.
Yeah.
So what are some of the effects that you've seen with people? Because you just outlined a beautiful formula there with aligning your habits, beliefs, and routines. What are some of the effects you've seen with people, maybe employees as well, in terms of how it's impacted the overall business?
Yeah. Well, it's a small team. I essentially have like me, my business partner, Jake, is in Colorado. And now we have some kind of contractors around working on the project, but not really dedicated to the project. But I can talk about, my relationship with Jake, and also the community that we're building. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I've noticed is that, Jake and I have invested a lot of time and energy in building, like, it's called empathetic listening. Mm-hmm. Essentially, like, it's like active listening, so that if someone's talking, then we actively listen, and we there's a framework. We use the nonviolent communication framework to embed empathy and compassion into our communication. So what I love is that I've been able to build a team where like any challenge that I'm going through, whether it's personally or professionally, like I have people that I can talk to. Whereas in my last business, I was bottling up a lot of the stresses and anxieties, and it was building up for years. Now, like if something's coming up and I'm like, I'm feeling anxious about something, I'm listening into that and I want to like talk about it. Talking about our emotions was kind of taboo in business. And it's becoming more and more accepted. And I just find that the company is able to persevere through any challenge because we have that empathetic listening. Because whatever challenges we're dealing with personally or professionally, we have that support system. And that helps to lead to these lighter emotions like joy and fulfillment and connection. So on a personal level, I feel extremely fulfilled with what I'm doing because of the team that I've built, because of the culture that I've built, and because of the community that all of these I'm continuing to build. And with my clients, I find that the biggest kind of immediate feedback is that they're getting more and more clarity, more and more clarity on what they really want, more and more clarity on what they need to do to get there. There's a lot of unknowns in business. So there's two benefits to getting clear. One is that we have that peace of mind, right? But so the clarity comes down to both what we actually want to accomplish, right? There's a sense of clarity of, okay, cool. Like I know the objectives, I know the key results. So I have my goals laid out. But there's also a clarity of what do I want to feel, right? So it's what do I want to do? What do I want to accomplish? What are the end goals that I want to work towards? But also what is the feeling that I want? So I have that clarity of, oh yeah, I want to do all this. And I also want to feel fulfilled and happy. Right. And I think, that's also part of the old paradigm of doing business is like just focusing on that single bottom line. How much money do you want to make? Right. But there's more layers of it. It's like, cool. Yeah. How much money do you want to make? What do you want to do in your free time? And how do you want to feel? Like, what is the baseline of your emotional states that you want? So there's like layers of clarity that I find the community of business leaders that I'm working with are able to experience, just by being asked unusual questions and by being given empathetic listening.
Beautiful. If you don't mind, Arye, I want to, because you've given us such good information, I want to transition into the final 4 questions. And you can think of these as kind of rapid fire questions that we ask everybody, but I'm very curious about your answers.
Okay.
So first question here is what is one area where you think people should pay more attention to when looking to improve their own performance?
Their breath.
Good answer. Great answer. What's your top trick for enhancing focus?
Man, I want to say breath.
You can. It's okay.
Yeah. Breath. Listen and feel. Connect with the breath.
I think that's been an answer for more than, I want to say 10% of people. It's a significant answer in the context of this question because it's very interesting to see how many high performers come back to something like the breath when enhancing focus.
Yeah.
So what book has significantly impacted your life and how you show up to perform in it?
Man, there were many, but the first one that came to mind is the autobiography of a yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda. this book was, so Steve Jobs actually read Autobiography of a Yogi on a yearly basis and gave out a copy to every single person at his funeral.
Mm-hmm. I didn't realize he did that, but that's interesting.
Yeah.
Arye, where can people find out more about you and what you're up to?
Yeah, so you can always check out our site, serenityventures.org, or hit me up on Facebook, LinkedIn, Arye Shabtai. It's ARYESHABTAI, which you'll see in the show notes, I'm sure.
Absolutely. The show notes for this one are going to be at decodingsuperhuman.com/serenity. Arye, this has been an absolute pleasure, my friend. I've enjoyed the conversation very much.
Likewise. Thank you, Boomer.
Superhumans, before you go, if you enjoy the episode, if you enjoy all of our episodes, head on over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. It would really, really help get the word out on what we're doing here at Decoding Superhuman. Feedback. If you want to give us direct feedback, or you want to see us cover a specific topic, whether on the shorter episodes or the longer episodes, head on over to your email and email us at podcast@decodingsuperhuman.com. For those of you who have sent emails to that address, you know that I respond to every single one. And then lastly, would you like 300 to 500 words of highly curated information on how to upgrade performance? If so, head on over to decodingsuperhuman.com/throwdown and you'll get our next issue of the Throwdown, which is our 300 to 500 word highly curated digest, if you will, on what's going on in the field of performance. Enjoy your day, Superhumans, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for tuning in to today's episode.